There's a comfort to a fire, isn't there? The way the light pushes back the dark just enough, the way the heat fights the chill. We tell ourselves we've mastered it. It's contained, it's controlled, it's ours. But we forget. Fire is a primal thing. It doesn't create, it consumes, it transforms. It reduces things to their most basic elements, ash and memory. We like to think our pasts work the same way, that we can reduce our worst moments to ash, that we can scatter them on the wind and be done with them. We tell ourselves that the person who did those things, who failed in those ways, that wasn't the real us, that we've changed, that we've grown. We tell ourselves our sins are behind us. But what if they're not? What if they're not behind you at all, but ahead of you, waiting for you, patient as a grave? This is a story about a man who learned that the hardest thing to outrun is your own shadow, and his name was Leo. Leo was a restorer, not of paintings or sculptures, but of old houses. He had a gift for feeling the bones of a place, for understanding what it needed. He'd spend months, sometimes years, bringing century-old homes back from the brink of collapse. He said he liked the silence, the dust motes dancing in the light from a newly installed window. He said it was peaceful. I think he was trying to build something solid around the hollow parts of himself. He bought a new property, a real fixer-upper, a Victorian monstrosity on the edge of a forgotten town, all gabled roofs and sagging porches. It had been empty for 50 years. The air inside was thick and still, tasting of decay and forgotten things. In the master bedroom, on the far wall, was an old fireplace, sealed up with bricks and mortar. Leo, being a purist, decided to open it. As he chipped away at the old mortar, his crowbar struck something hollow. Not a brick, but wood. Tucked deep inside the flue, wrapped in oilcloth that was brittle with age, was a small box. Inside the box, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a watch. It wasn't gold or silver. It was made of a dark, smoky metal, and its face was wrong. Instead of numbers, there were strange, spiraling symbols etched into the glass, and it had 3 hands, but they weren't moving. They were perfectly, utterly still. It was cold to the touch, a deep, seeping cold that felt like it reached into the bone. Leo, intrigued, fastened it to his wrist. The clasp clicked shut with a finality that made him jump, and the second hand jerked forward. It didn't tick, it swept. A smooth, silent, relentless motion. The other hands began to move too, gliding towards those strange, unreadable symbols. Leo felt a strange sensation, not a sound, but a pressure, a vibration in his teeth, a feeling of dreadful anticipation, like the moment before a car crash, drawn out and stretched then. He couldn't explain it, but he knew with a certainty that chilled him more than his metal on his wrist, that this watch was not counting down to a time. It was counting down to a moment. He tried to take it off. The clasp wouldn't budge. He tried to break the band. It didn't scratch. It was fused to him. Panic began to set in, cold and sharp. He stared at the silent, sweeping hands, at the symbols they were slowly approaching. And as he stared, the symbols began to resolve. In his mind's eye, they weren't symbols anymore. They were an image, a memory. Rain on a windshield. Smell of old vinyl and cheap beer. The shaky beam of headlights on a narrow, wooded road. Laughter. His laughter. And someone else's. A girl's laughter. Sarah. The memory hit him like a physical blow. He hadn't thought of Sarah in 20 years. Sarah with her bright eyes and her easy smile. Sarah, who had trusted him. The watch was counting down to that night. The worst night of his life. He'd been young, stupid, drunk on cheap power and cheaper beer. He'd offer her a ride home from a party, show off his new car. He drove too fast. She told him to slow down. He just laughed, pressed the accelerator harder. A deer flashed in the headlights. He swerved. Too hard. The car left the road. It wasn't a violent crash. It was a slow, grinding descent into a ravine, trees screeching against metal until they came to a jarring stop against an oak tree. He was fine. Shaken, but fine. Sarah wasn't. She'd hit her head on the window. There was blood. Not a lot, but enough. She was dazed, confused. He was sober now. Ice cold sober with panic. He looked at her. He looked at the bottle on the floor of the car. He was underage. He'd be ruined. His future. Gone. So he made a choice. He told her she had to walk it off, that she was fine. that they couldn't report this. He helped her out of the car, his voice frantic, convincing her, convincing himself. He left her there, by the side of that dark road, dazed and bleeding. He told her he'd go get help, that he'd come right back. He didn't. He drove home, his hands shaking on the wheel. He spent the night cleaning the car, hiding the damage, his heart hammering against his ribs. The next day, he heard the news. Sarah had been found in the ditch, hours later. Hypothermia, the doctor said. A concussion. She'd fallen, they assumed, hit her head. They never connected it to him. He never said a word. He packed that night away in a dark, locked box inside of himself, and he never, ever opened it. He built a life on top of that secret. He became Leo the Restorer, a good man, a quiet man. But the watch had dug it up. It had found that rotten cornerstone of his life, and it was counting down the exact moment that he made that choice. The moment he decided to save himself instead of her. He didn't know how he knew, but he was certain. When the three hands met on that specific symbol, he would be back there. He would relive it. Not a memory. He would be there. The following days were a special kind of hell. The watch was a constant cold weight on his wrist. The silent sweeping hands were a metronome counting down the seconds of his sanity. He couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the rain, the road, Sarah's confused face. He tried everything. Saws, blowtorches, acid. Nothing marked the watch. He went to doctors, therapists. They spoke of guilt, of psychosomatic manifestations. They told him to remove the prop. They didn't understand. It wasn't a prop. It was a verdict. He became obsessed with the moment of convergence. He calculated it. He had 11 days. 11 days until his past came due. As the days bled away, strange things began to happen. Whispers in empty rooms that sounded like Sarah's voice. The smell of rain and wet leaves in the middle of his dry, dusty workshop. One night he woke up and the pillow next to him was damp, as if from rain. The world was thinning around him. The past was bleeding through. On the final day, he knew he couldn't run. He had to face it. He drove out to the old road. It was unchanged after 20 years. The tree his car had hit still bore the scars, old and gnarled. He stood there, the watch cold on his wrist. The hands were so close now, almost aligned. He waited. The sun began to set, painting the woods in a long, guilty shadow. The pressure in his head grew unbearable. The world began to waver. The colors bled. The sound of the wind faded, replaced by a faint, static hiss. And then it started to rain. Not the gentle rain of the present day, a cold, hard rain from 20 years ago. His car was there. Not the sedan he drove now, but his old beat-up junker. He was inside it. He could feel the worn vinyl of the steering wheel, smell the beer on his own breath, hear the radio playing a song he hadn't heard in 2 decades. He was there, not remembering, reliving. He saw Sarah next to him, laughing, her face young and alive and trusting. He screamed at her in his mind, "Get out, run, don't trust me." But his past self just laughed and pressed the gas. The deer, the swerve, the grinding, terrible crash. The impact jolted him. He was outside of himself and inside of himself all at once. He was a terrified young man in the driver's seat, and he was the haunted older man screaming from the back seat that no one could hear. He saw himself turn to Sarah. He saw the blood. He saw the panic in his own young eyes. He saw the moment of decision, the selfish, cowardly calculation. He saw his own mouth open and form the words. "You have to walk it off. It's fine. We can't tell anyone." He tried to fight it. He tried to wrest control of his own body, to force his younger hand to reach for the phone, to call for help. It was like trying to move a mountain. The past was solid. It was immutable. It had already happened. He was just a ghost in the machine of his own memory. He watched himself help her out of the car, her movements clumsy and disoriented. He saw the fear in her eyes, the dawning realization that he was leaving her. He heard his own voice lying. "I'll get help. I'll come right back." He felt the relief that flooded his younger self as he drove away, the sickening, selfish relief of having escaped consequences. And then he was pulled. Not back to the present, but with his younger self. He was in the car as it drove away. He was a prisoner in his own fleeing vehicle, forced to watch through the rear window as Sarah, small and confused, faded into the rain and the darkness. He felt the watch on his wrist grow warm, then hot, then searing. He looked down. The three hands finally met. They were perfectly aligned, and they stopped. The world snapped back. He was on his knees in the present-day road, the gentle evening sun shining, the modern car parked nearby. He was sobbing, great heaving sobs of a grief and a guilt 20 years fresh. It was over. He had faced it. He had relived it. The punishment was over. He looked at the watch, expecting it to fall away, its curse fulfilled. It didn't. The hands began to move again. They reset themselves, not to 0, but to a new point on the dial. A new set of symbols began to resolve in his mind. A different memory. A later one. A time he'd lied to a business partner to save his own skin, bankrupting the man. A time he'd turned a friend away in need because it was inconvenient. Smaller sins, but sins nonetheless. The watch was cold on his wrist again. The second hand began its silent, relentless sweep. He understood then. This wasn't a punishment for one sin. This was the instrument of his own conscience. It would never let him forget. It would never let him outrun himself. It would march him, moment by moment, through every moral failure, every act of cowardice, every selfish choice he had ever made. His past wasn't behind him. It was a road he was doomed to walk forever, each step taking him closer to the next moment he wished he could forget. He sits in that old Victorian house now, the one he was meant to restore. He just stares at the watch. He doesn't eat. He doesn't sleep. He just waits for the next journey back to a self he thought he'd buried. They say your past catches up to you. But what if it was never chasing you at all? What if you were always walking towards it? And the thing that you thought was chasing you was just your own shadow, growing longer in the setting sun of every bad decision until it finally swallows you whole. So look into this fire. Watch the way the flames consume the wood. They don't judge it. They don't forgive it. They just reduce it to what it truly is. What are you made of? And what moment is your own personal watch counting down to? Hey, thank you guys for listening. This has been an original story that I wrote for Blood Moon Radio. So I hope you've enjoyed. And if you like this and you'd like more content like this, then you know what to do. Like and subscribe. It's free. It would really help to grow the channel, which is what I'm trying to do right now. So be kind. Keep the porch light on. This is Sam, signing off.